Hello and welcome to the new video. If this is your first time here, my name is Hannah and today I will be talking about all the books that I've read during June and July. If it's something that interests you, stick around and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future videos. Let's start with June. June was a very busy month for me reading wise, and you will see when I start showing you some stats and talking about my June stats, as that was the month of the amazing readathon hosted by Brie from Four Paws and a Book. This was my first readathon ever, so I really didn't know what to expect. And also I have to mention I was off for 2 weeks in June. It was my holiday from work. I didn't go anywhere, but I spent a lot of time at home crocheting and mostly listening to the audiobooks. Let me first start with some stats from June. In the month of June, I've read and listened to 27 books, 4,135 pages, and 108.58 hours of audio. The average time to finish a book for me during that month was 2 days. My top 3 genres were horror, thriller, and LGBTQIA+, because we were getting extra points for this genre. The format of the books that I've read, 78% audio, which is 21 books, 7% digital, which is 2 books, and 15% print, which is 4 physical books. The average rating for that month was 3.78 stars, which is very good. That's really close to 4 stars. I will quickly tell you about the books and how I rated them, but I will talk more about the books that I rated higher than the others. So my 2 stars books were Greenfield's Burning. I rated it 2 stars and I just didn't enjoy the story. I couldn't get into it and it was weird. Stephen King and John Glover, The Lawnmower Man, Stories from the Night Shift, and it was a collection of short stories and I rated it 2 stars as well. I found them weird. I found them very Stephen King-y. I've read better. Normally I don't rate short stories higher than 3 stars, but this was even, it's kind of one of those books that I read and forget. My 2.5 stars books, that were both audiobooks as well. It's Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. I just found this book boring and dragged out. The Cottage by Lisa Stone, that I also gave it 2.5 stars. And I don't know, I just didn't enjoy this book. I think the writing wasn't for me. I've listened to it all, I finished it, but I think it was a cringy book. I had a lot of cringy moments listening to that book, so I rated it 2.5 stars. Then the 3 stars books. Episode 13, which I liked, it was a audiobook following a group of people working on an episode for the Ghost Stories series, and they explore this haunted house. I really enjoyed that one. I recommend it. It was really good. I listened to it as an audiobook as well. The next book I rated 3 stars was Gwendy's Baton Box, and that was written by Stephen King and Richard Chisma. And I enjoyed it. I found the premise and the idea of the book very interesting. I liked this book. We Need to Do Something by Max Booth III. I rated it 3 stars as well, and I listened to it as an audiobook. It was a weird book. I still don't know what really happened in that book. Was it the evil or was it the aliens? So I enjoyed it. Carmilla, that was an audiobook and I rated it 3 stars. I enjoyed it, but it was okay. A very traditional vampire story. Mira Grant, Rolling in the Deep, and that was about evil mermaids. I enjoyed it. Then we have Whalefall by Daniel Kraus. I really enjoyed this book. It was weird, it was strange. I've never read anything like this, and the ending kind of got me shocked because I didn't expect that this book is going to end like that, but kudos to him. This book reminded me a lot about 127 Hours movie. What would you do to survive? So yeah, I did enjoy it. Now thinking about it, I think maybe it's more than 3 stars. Maybe it's like 3.5 stars. The last book in a 3-star set is My Darling Girl by Jennifer McMahon. That was about a family of a husband, wife and 2 daughters, and the wife's mother has cancer and she's moving into their family's house to spend her last days with them. Generally, I enjoyed this story. There was few creepy moments in that I really liked, but I think there was more moments when I was just getting annoyed with that book. Then we have my 4-star reads. Magic Lies and Deadly Pies by Misha Pop. And that was a cozy mystery book about a woman that bakes deadly cakes. It's kind of like a Assassin by referral only. It was alright. It was a good, cozy mystery read. It's not my usual type of a book, but I still enjoyed it. I really liked it. I rated it 4 stars. What Lies Between Us by John Mars, and it was the first book of him that I've read ever, and it was about a daughter and a mother that live in one house, and the mother is a prisoner of the daughter in the top rooms of the house. And this book was full of suspense. I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of twists and turns in the story that were very unexpected, and maybe because it was my first book by this author, I really enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 stars. Into the Drowning Deep, and this was book 1 by Mira Grant. The Rolling in the Deep was book 2, but the events in Rolling in the Deep were happening before Into the Drowning Deep, basically. And like I said, this is a story of evil mermaids. Then we have The Guest List by Lucy Foley. That was my first Lucy Foley book, and I really enjoyed it. This was happening on the island. There was some sort of a gathering, a birthday or a wedding or something, and it was a very typical, now I know, Lucy Foley book, whodunit. Only a certain amount of people on that island. No one is getting out, no one is getting in, and someone gets killed. Now, I rated this book 4 stars. Now, having read more Lucy Foley's books, I probably would rate it lower, but I'm not going to change my rating because at that time I felt like I really enjoyed this book. The Sundown Motel by Simon St. James, and also I listened to this as an audiobook and I rated it 4 stars, and that was a very intriguing story. I really enjoyed it. It was happening in this motel where during the night shift different things were happening. People were seeing ghosts, and we follow this girl that decides to follow in the footsteps of her aunt who disappeared in the 80s or 90s or something like this. This girl, she never even met the auntie, but she only heard stories about her, and at one point before she goes to uni, she decides to follow in her footsteps and maybe find out what happened to her, and she ends up working in the same motel as the aunt, and then the story continues and develops, and I will say if you like paranormal stuff, you will like this book, and I did really like it too. All Systems Red, and it was a very short audiobook, and it was following a robot that called himself a murder bot, and this robot was a part of a crew that was going to another planet or something like this. I can't remember exactly. And the reason I gave this book 4 stars is because I absolutely loved this robot's banter and the sense of humor. And if you have, I don't know, whatever audiobook source you have, if you've never listened to All Systems Red, I highly recommend you actually listen to an audiobook because it's very fun when you listen to the narrator going into the role of that murder bot. The last book from my 4-star set is an actual book This is Every Exquisite Thing by Laura Stephen. This book is a retelling of Picture of Dorian Gray, and we follow a group of students that probably don't make the best decision and decide to have the portrait painted. And after they have the portrait painted, everything starts to happen and the story evolves, and it gets really intense and very interesting and very intriguing, and we eventually find out what really happened, how everything started. I love this book and I absolutely recommend it. And then we have my 4.5 stars books, and these are The Reappearance of Rachel Price, which I do have a paper copy here, but I actually listened to this on audio while I was making a blanket. Okay, so in this book we follow a teenage girl, Belle, and her mother disappeared when Belle was just a baby. And I think there's some sort of an anniversary going on, and there's a film crew in town. They do a unsolved crimes or something like that series, and they decide to talk to Belle and the family members about disappearance of Rachel. And then out of the blue, Rachel comes back. So yeah, it's a bit confusing, and some people don't believe that she's the real Rachel. Belle is doing her own investigation with her friend, and it's very interesting to see how this situation really happened in the past, and it only comes out at the end of the book. But it's a very gripping and a very fast-paced book, and I definitely absolutely enjoyed it, and I would recommend it to anyone to read. Young adult thriller, but I think any age would enjoy. Another 4.5 star book for me was, I think I read this one on my Kindle. This is Where We Talk Things Out, and that was quite unsettling actually. This was about a mother trying to rebuild her relationship with her daughter, and she invites her to spend a weekend together in this cabin somewhere. And the daughter says yes, and they go to that place and they get snowed in. And there's a lot of different things that the mother is doing, and it's very unsettling to the daughter. She took her phone, she took her clothes, she's treating her like she is pretty much a very like young girl. I think it was a short book. I think it was less than 200 pages, so you can read it quite quick. But the way it ends is, yeah, it's a bit unsettling. I enjoy that one. And then I have my 5-star books. Let's start with The Invocations by Crystal Sutherland. I always want to say Karen. It's Crystal Sutherland. Now, if I knew what I was picking up, I probably wouldn't have read this book, because this is a witchy book, and my experiences with witchy books are quite negative. So I probably would never pick it up, but I did, and I'm glad I did, because I rated this book 5 stars. This book follows 3 girls, young girls. One is trying to bring her sister back to life. The second one is trying to get rid of a demon that's attached to her. And the third one is a witch that can help them with this. So they get together. Also, in the background, women are being murdered, and specifically the women that were given invocations from that witch. If I knew that it was a witchy book, I would not pick it up. But now I am very happy, and I even picked up the other book by this author, The House of Hollow. So I'm looking forward to reading that as well. The next 5-star read is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I never know how to pronounce his name. But this is a story about a woman that supposedly killed her husband, and she is in a psychiatric hospital. She is silent. She is not responsive to any psychiatrist trying to speak to her. And then one day she opens up to this one doctor, And the whole story starts from pretty much from there. We find out what really happened, who the people involved are, and it's such a twist. I honestly, maybe I'm stupid, but I honestly didn't see it coming. 5 stars. I loved it. Another book that I've given 5 stars to is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. The main character, Easton, he is called by his friend Madeline to get to her house because apparently she's dying, and he gets to the residence, the palace or whatever they live, and he discovers the whole area is covered by very strange looking mushrooms, and there's basically weird things growing everywhere. And Madeline doesn't seem like herself. There's like strange things happening with her around the house, and the whole story is just weird and lovely. There's weird rabbits hopping around and weird fish, and I absolutely loved the descriptions of the nature of the fungi, of even the hair on Madeleine. If you read it, you know what I'm talking about. So highly recommend it. Very quick read, and a very intense and very enjoyable. My next 5-star read is Strange Sally Diamond by Liz Nugent. Nugent. This book, I've read the first chapter, first line, and I was hooked. I knew straight away that it's going to be a 5-star read, and I think I swallowed it in like 2 afternoons. Sally Diamond is a adopted child, but now she's obviously an adult woman, but she went through a lot of trauma in her life, and she comes across as strange. She used to live in this farmhouse with her mother and father. The mother died, and she's just with the father, and people in the village treat her as strange. She doesn't really talk much. They think she is not all there. Her father dies, but before he died, he was ill for some time, and he basically said to her, when I die, just put me out with the rubbish. So Sally, on the day of his death, she takes his body and she cremates him in a furnace that they have on the farm. And this is when the whole story starts, and it was I loved it. The whole description of Sally. Sally was such a rich character. We at one point we eventually find out what happened to her in her past and why she is like this, and it was just a cool book. It was a fast read. I super enjoyed it, and I will be recommending this to people. And especially I'm so happy as well because I kind of picked this book up on a whim. I went to the shops and it was in this big basket, W.H. Smith recommends, and I just picked it up, liked the cover, and I picked it up, and I'm so happy I did because I can add it now to my 5-star book collection. My next 5-star book is The Watchers by A.M. Shine, and you have probably seen the movie that came out in June, and let me tell you, the movie is not so good. The book is so much better. We follow a group of people that unfortunately ended up in this forest, and in the middle of that forest there is a cabin with glass front, and every single day after dusk the light comes on, and when the light comes on in the cabin they all have to be inside, because what happens during the night is the watchers come out and they watch them and they study them. And this is a story of this group of people, how they are living in this forest and how eventually they escape it. And it was so intense, it was so creepy. I really enjoyed this book. I swallowed this book whole in one piece. I highly recommend the book. Book is so much better than the movie, and I think you should read it. My next 5-star read is Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle, and On the surface, this book is about the most successful gay conversion camp. In this book, we follow Rosa, who one day starts feeling weird and basically flies are coming out of her mouth. And she's having different visions and she doesn't know why. And she and a group of friends, or one friend, investigate and find out what really happens in Camp Damascus. And I can't remember much else. I must have read it in the beginning of June. It's been a while, we're in August now. But I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 5 stars and I think you should read it too. Last but not least, in a 5-star bunch is The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty. And I've listened to this as an audiobook and I freaking loved it. I've seen The Exorcist movies many times, but the audiobook, oof, if you have never listened to this, that's the sort of a book. The narrator is so good. It really makes you feel like you're there with them. And there's a lot of things that were not in the movie. And I absolutely enjoyed it. The descriptions were just crazy. I absolutely love this book. I will probably want to read it again in a physical version. I think I need to add it to my rereads. Yeah, definitely enjoyed the audiobook. After that, I've watched the movie again and the book was just so much better. So if you enjoyed the Exorcist movie, read the book or listen to the book because it's so much better. I don't think I need to tell you what that was about. I think it's everybody knows The Exorcist, about a little girl being possessed by the devil. Yeah, if you didn't know, sorry, spoiler. That was my June books. That was the books that drained me. And after June, I kind of went into a little reading slump and I wasn't so fast about reading. Also, July was the time when I went on holiday with my family for 2 weeks. I was busy and I was relaxing and I didn't read a lot, but I read few books in July. So let's start with some stats first. I've read 6 books, 939 pages and 50.08 hours of audio. Top 3 genres: LGBTQIA+, then thriller, and then science fiction. The format of the books: digital 17%, that was 1 book; print 33%, that was 2 books; audio 50%, 3 books. The average rating for the month was 3.38 stars, so we've seen better. Let's start with the 2-star books, which is 1. It's Underground by S.O. Gray. It was a story of a group of people that bought units in this underground bunker in case of an apocalypse. And they go down in this bunker because there is a virus outbreak and someone dies. And even though the premise and the idea for the book was amazing, and it was so, this is the reason I picked it up, because the idea was great. The execution though, that's on the other hand not so good, and it took me a long time to finish reading this book. I didn't see myself reaching for it and wanting to read it. Eventually I finished it on my holiday because it was the last thing I had and I wanted to finish it. It was also a library book which fell apart and I had to make it good again. So yeah, I rated that book 2 stars. I don't know if I would pick anything else by these authors. We have our 3-star books. I have 2. I have 1 audiobook, John Ma's The Marriage Act, and the concept of this book was good as well. I enjoyed this book. I gave it 3 stars. For me, it was the idea of imagining living in a society when you have that marriage act, when you have smart marriage, when you are being monitored by relationship experts and by devices that are listening out for certain words and things that are happening in a house. There's more to it going on. I think other John Mar's books were a bit more connected. This one follows a lot of points of views. Some are connected slightly, but there's not one main story to this book. And I think, yeah, it could have been a little bit better, but I still enjoyed it. My next 3-star read for July was The Sunbringer by Hannah Kainer, and I thought I would like this book way more. This is a sequel to The God Killer, and at the end of God Killer the characters get separated. In this book we follow the same characters plus some new ones, but they are separated for the most of the story. Only in the last chapter they get together again. I did enjoy this book. I think I enjoyed The God Killer a little bit more because they were kind of like a team working together. I will buy book 3 and I will read book 3 because I want the conclusion to this series. But am I going to reach for special editions? Probably not, because I feel a little bit disappointed with this one. If I was to rate the artwork, I would rate it 5-star. I think this artist, Tom Roberts, I actually followed him on Instagram. Amazing artist, and this cover must be one of my favorite covers this year because I absolutely love these turquoise colors. So yeah, 3 stars for Sunbringer. Okay, the book I've rated 3.75 stars is All the Dead Lie Down by Kyrie Macaulay, and I took that 0.25 for the slow start. The start was slow. I found it a little bit confusing, but again, it's hard to say for me because I listened to an audiobook, and again, it's a fantasy book, and sometimes I understand them better. I can concentrate better when I read an actual copy, but still, it doesn't change the fact that if you round it up, it's 4 stars, yeah? Okay, so that was a story about this girl, can't remember her name, that goes to stay with a family in a house. There's 2 little girls, and strange things start to happen around the house when the older sister comes back from her boarding school. I didn't even read the synopsis when I was picking that book up. That was a library book that I had on audio, and I don't know, for some reason it was recommended to me and it was available when I didn't have anything else to listen to. And yeah, I did enjoy it, and now I actually ordered a physical copy of this book so I can reread it again and maybe pay a little bit more attention to the beginning of this book, and hopefully I will be able to rate this a bit higher. But I do recommend it. This is a young adult horror book. There was a little bit of scary bits, but they were not so scary. So if you want to dip your toes in horror, I think that would be quite interesting, especially if you like the subjects of necromancy and queer characters as well. So highly recommend it. The book that I rated 4 stars in July is The Passengers by John Marrs. And oh my days, let me tell you, this book, the pacing was so fast. The plot to the story was just great. The Passengers is a story that follows a group of people. They're separate from each other. They are in this autonomic cars that basically you just put your destination and the car will take you there. You don't have to drive, you don't have to do anything. These passengers, the doors locked, and they are taken to this one location and they think they're going to die. So at the same time there's a panel of judges that is deciding whether the accident that happened sometime before was the fault of a human or was it a fault of that self-driving car. And they get hacked, their communications get hacked, and they see and hear people in these cars, and they have to decide who will die. And there's just so much goodness in this book. I absolutely loved it. I've listened to this as an audiobook as well. I think I would like to get my hands on a physical copy and immerse myself again in the world of The Passengers. But I highly recommend this book if you like fast-paced suspense. You will love it. And then we have my last book of the month. And surprise, surprise, I didn't have any 5-star books in July. I didn't read that much, so that's understandable. The last book of July is Stay in the Light by A.M. Shine, and this actually is a knock that I had from NetGalley. So thank you very much to NetGalley for allowing me to read this book ahead of the publishing date, which is, I believe, in October this year. Stay in the Light is a sequel to The Watchers, and I told you before that I loved The Watchers. I rated it 5 stars, and I had really high hopes for Stay in the Light as well. I rated it 4.5 stars. The story was a little bit slow, and there were few moments when I was a bit like, cringe. But I still enjoyed it. I still really, really liked it. I understand that it's hard if you had a very successful book and you're writing a sequel to match the intensity of the sequel to the intensity of the first book. Cut the long story short, we follow Mina from book 1. Mina's basically hiding from the Watchers. She gets found and she needs to escape. At the same time, a son of the professor from book 1 has found something in the caves, and they're digging. There's a group of them, archaeologists, digging, and they discovered these tunnels and these caves with like writing and different symbols on the walls. But so their discovery is kind of happening at the same time when Mina is dealing with her issues, and about half of the book I would say is quite slow, and then the second half picks up and we finally see some action. And the action, I'm here for it. I enjoy it. Anyway, if you want to know more thoughts about this book, I talk about this book in my Portugal vlog, because I finished reading that book in Portugal and I was talking a lot about this book. So I am not going to repeat myself again. I'll just tell you this was my highest rated book of the month, and I will be getting a copy, a physical copy, when it comes out. That's the 2 months of reading for me. 27 books in June and 6 books in July. And let's not forget about all the DNFs. So I DNF'd 2 books in June, in July. Actually, both of them in July. So the first book that I DNF'd was She Never Left by C.M. Harris, and it was supposed to be a good book with Stranger Things vibes. I DNF'd it at 75%. I just didn't enjoy it. The next book that I DNF'd was We Are All Ghosts in the Forest by Lorraine Wilson. And I've DNF'd this book after, I think, at about 5 or 10%. This was an arc that I had from NetGalley as well. Let me see when this book is coming out. So this book is coming out in November this year. Only reason I DNF'd this book was the fact that I just couldn't get into it. I started reading it. I think I've read, I don't know, maybe less than 10% of the book, and I was just struggling with it. I was not reaching for this. And I decided to just DNF it and read something else instead. So it might be a good book. I don't know. You need to kind of find out for yourself. On Goodreads, this book is rated 3.86. And it has 35 ratings, so it's not so bad. It just wasn't a book for me. So yeah, so these are my books and these are my DNFs. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I don't know if I'm going to do more in the future. Let me know if you want to see my monthly wrap-ups, or would you rather I talk about books fresh in like current reading vlogs. But let me know what you like, because that's always helpful. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what were your thoughts about them. And if you've managed to stick here till the end of this video, leave me a ghost emoji in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.